Welcome to the Word on Woodward, presented by PointsBet, an official gaming partner of the Detroit Tigers, Detroit Red Wings, and Little Caesars Arena. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, alongside my co-host, Art Regner, and joining us today, your newest Tiger, Tucker Barnhart. Tucker, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Excited to get to know you, and welcome to Detroit unofficially, since you're not technically here yet.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm, like you said, I'm excited to get to Detroit first and foremost, but to do anything and everything I can to help this team win, and I'm just really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, we think you are a great addition. It's going to be a fun season having you around. And you talked a lot in your welcome press conference with the Detroit media about how excited you are to be a Tiger. What excites you about this organization and being a part of this ball club?
First and foremost, it's the young group of pitchers that I'm going to get to work with. I'm very excited to work with those guys, get to know those guys, and just to be a part of such a storied franchise that I'm hopeful to aid in any way possible to help our team win.
Tucker, you played obviously for the Cincinnati. Are they officially still the Redlegs? Is that really what their official name is? I know it's shortened to the Reds, but they're like the oldest baseball team. And now you come to another team that's a charter member. I mean, if you can't play for the oldest baseball team, at least playing for the Tigers has to be pretty cool.
No doubt. To answer your first question, I'm not really sure. I've only known them as the Reds officially, but from one very storied franchise to another, um, the from the oldest franchise in baseball to one of the oldest, it's pretty cool. There can't be a lot of guys that can say that, so I'm fortunate to be a guy.
Yeah, I want to ask you this question because I asked a Tiger pitcher last year where they were bringing in another catcher that as a pitcher, do you reach out to the catcher? And he thought I was crazy. It's like, no, I mean, I'm going to see him in spring training. I would wonder, and I guess this is just me, if I were a catcher or a pitcher and my new battery mate is coming in, I'd want to get to know this guy like right away. I mean, I would reach out to him immediately whether we're in spring training or not. I mean, have you reached out to a lot of guys or have they reached out to you?
I spoke with Casey Mize really quickly when the trade was official. I haven't talked to anybody else. I talked to Chris Fetter last night. I talked to AJ Hinch. I'm kind of making my rounds as far as people in the organization to talk to, and I'm going to get to those pitchers soon. I'm a firm believer that spring training is for baseball and hitting the ground running, not small talk and getting to know guys. So I'm very hopeful to knock out as many get to know you conversations that I possibly can this offseason, this winter, so that when we get to spring training, that we can talk about facing guys like Jose Abreu with bases loaded, 2 outs in the eighth inning versus, hey man, what do you like to eat for dinner? So
Down to business.
those conversations are going to happen soon.
All right, I
That's
love
good.
that. You mentioned, yeah, I think that's great. I think that's awesome, right down to business when you get to spring training. And you mentioned that you talked to AJ Hinch and Chris Fetter. What'd you think of them? Because everybody's really excited to have them here in Detroit, and so far, so good.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about both of those guys. I talked to Chris for about a half hour last night. I talked to AJ right after the trade was official. And it may be a biased opinion, but for me, for somebody to value my position as a catcher as highly as a guy like AJ does and Chris, it makes me feel really good. And that's not to say that with the Reds that I wasn't valued that way, because I know I was, but it's just very outward um, with the compliments and the way that how highly they praise the catching position. That makes me very, very happy and very excited.
I look at this Tiger team and all these young arms, and I guess what I'm curious about. You just mentioned Chris Fetter, and he's not a hologram as much as we think he is because he very rarely speaks, and a half hour conversation that's like a half hour more than anybody's ever talked to him. But with that said, I think maybe as fans, we don't really quite understand the dynamic that a catcher has to have with the pitching coach as well. It's just not a relationship with the pitchers. Can you go into that a little bit? I mean, how is the pitching coach kind of like your coach too, or am I oversimplifying it?
No, that's 100% accurate. I think the easiest way I can put it is I talk to my wife and I talk to my pitching coach during the season about an equal amount. That's how many conversations we have. It's daily. It's multiple times per day. It's during the game. I think the communication between a catcher and a pitching coach and a catcher and a pitcher, all three of us together, is imperative to have success. And so that's another relationship and conversations that I hope to get, like the get to know you stages, out of the way prior to spring training, so we can again just get down to business. And obviously, we'll have conversations that are different and not baseball related, but the majority of those conversations during spring training are important to have based on situations that you're going to see in a game, because in spring training it's a unique um, game feel, and you're not out there facing those guys that you need to get outs necessarily like you will during the regular season. And so being able to kind of talk through those situations that are going to come up that you may not face in spring training is huge. And I think the same thing goes with the pitchers that it does with the pitching coach, because we got to figure out how we work. I got to figure out how he works. He's got to figure out how I work, and so we can face as many speed bumps throughout the season that we can.
So, most important question: how does your wife feel about the fact that you pretty much have her and now Chris Fetter on speed dial?
As long as she stays on speed dial, I think I'll be good.
Yeah.
Which obviously that'll be the case. But she's we've been married for almost 6 years now, so she understands what the season's like. So her and my boys, they'll be around every single day, and they know that scouting reports have to happen with Dad at the dining room table, drinking coffee in the morning some days. And this is part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure they love it.
I'm sure they do too.
They
Hey,
do.
Tucker, baseball's hit this new age of analytics and spin rates and all that kind of junk, stuff that I really don't understand, and I'm trying to learn it. I know that Fetter's really into that. I know Ryan Garco, the new player development guy. How much are you as a catcher? I mean, do you go in after an inning and let's say Matt Manning or Scooble or even Casey Arthur Mize is struggling a little bit, does Feder come up to you and say, "What's the spin ratio?" or "What's the velo?" I mean, do you talk in that kind of language? Do you understand it, or are you more just a nuts and bolts kind of guy saying he's just not getting his curveball over?
I think it's going to sound like I'm kind of getting away from the question, but it's a little bit of both. The spin rate questions and stuff like that don't really happen, or at least in my past. But the velo question is there. Velo normal? Is it down? Um, what's the shape of his breaking ball? Those questions, and those conversations happen for sure. But there's also the feel part of the game that you don't you can't get away from, in my opinion, because we've all been playing for so long. And one of the best words of advice that I've ever gotten from a coach is trust your eyes. I mean, I'm 31. I've been playing baseball since I was 4 years old. So, along with that, right off the heels of that comment, the comment was made: you learn all you need to know about pitching in Little League. Get to two strikes as fast as you can, and put guys away and get them out. So I think there's absolutely room for simplification of the game. I think you have to, because I think with every number and stat that's out there right now, they can find one for anything. That you have to not be able to lose sight of the feel part of it. I'm a firm believer of analytics. I think there's room for it, and there absolutely is a place for it in the game. But I think there's also the feel part as well. You can't get away from.
Well, last question from me. I'm sure It's a running joke. Art always has a list of like 30 questions, so I don't know how many he's going to rattle off after this one. But I have one more for you. And you also talked about in your welcome press conference just the fact that you were happy that this happened so fast, so quickly into the off season, right? That you know where you're playing because things were in question for you a little bit in Cincinnati. Just how much will that help you in preparation for a new season, whether it be mentally, physically, whatever that aspect might be? Just how much more will you be prepared now that you know where you're going to be next season?
Well, I think the mental point is all case by case thing, and where I'm headed personally. Like, I'm not good with change, and I'm not good with the unknown of things. And so, my thought process headed into the off season was preparing for it to go into January and maybe not have a job kind of thing. And that was hard. It was hard to prep for, but obviously that's the reality of the situation, or could have been the reality of the situation. But with that said, to your point, I'm very happy that it happened early, because what we talked about earlier about the relationships that you build with your coaches and with your pitchers, especially in my situation as a catcher, I think we have to be the most prepared, in my opinion. And again, that may be biased, but I think it's the reality of the position that if you want to get it right, do it well, you have to be very prepared. I mean, not often you see quarterbacks in the NFL, I'm sure, not prepare and go out and play well. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. So I think the same thing stands true to a catcher. So as far as the physical side of it, it's not really going to change anything. I have the way that I like to get ready for a year, where when I start to work out, when I start to hit and throw and things like that. So that won't change anything. But the mental side of it and being able to prep for a season and know who I'm prepping for and prepping with is huge for me.
It
I
does.
was really excited for you to be a part of this organization before this interview, but now that we've talked to you, I'm even more excited. I'm really excited to see what you do with the young pitching staff. It's going to be really fun to watch this season. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it, guys, so much. I'm excited to be in Detroit. I'm excited to do anything I can to help this team win as much as possible. I think there's so many good things that have been happening that I'm just excited to be a little part of what's going to move this team forward.
Yes, well, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. And of course, a big thank you to PointsBet for presenting the Word on Woodward. PointsBet is an official gaming partner of the Detroit Tigers, Detroit Red Wings, and Little Caesars Arena. We'll see you next time.